The national narrative around the New Orleans Saints, especially going into this season, was that they were the worst team in the NFL. And I'm here to tell you why the New Orleans Saints do, in fact, not suck, and why, despite what everyone is trying to tell you, the New Orleans Saints are not the worst team in football. I want you to get in the comment section and share your thoughts. Who do you think is the bottom of the barrel? In my opinion, it's those frauds down in South Beach. The Miami Dolphins are absolutely terrible. I want to hear from you, though. Get in the comment section. Who's the worst team in the entire league? Now, let's start this conversation off with addressing the obvious. The New Orleans Saints are 0-2. The New Orleans Saints are not going to be competing for a Super Bowl this year. The New Orleans Saints are not a team that is going to lead the league in any statistical category. They'd be lucky to finish in the top half of the league. That's, I think, the goal is what you should be shooting for. But despite being 0-2, they've showed a lot of fight. They've had opportunities to win both of these matchups, and they've given themselves a chance late in these games to walk away victorious. And for a team that's been deemed the worst in the league, it's really all you can ask for. Again, one possession losses in the first 2 weeks against two squads that might turn out to be pretty solid opponents. But of course, the season is far from over, so there's still a lot to take a look at throughout the regular season. But in 2025 so far, you can look at your screen, digest the numbers, take them all in. Now that we've looked at it, I want you to look across. You see anything on this ranking that says 32nd, 31st, 30th? I understand that the red zone percentage and the third down percentage on defense ranks 29th. But that's the lowest any spot ranks. The yards per play on defense, top 10. I mean, come on now. You are the 50th. You are the number 50%. You are halfway through on the red zone percentage. You 16 out of 32. That is dead center. That is aggressively average. That's mid, the definition of it. If you ask me, the worst team in football would have much, much worse production than what you just saw on screen. Wouldn't the worst team in football have a lot more yards per play allowed? Wouldn't they not be top 10 in yards per play allowed? Wouldn't they be lower than 20th in yards per game that they have? Wouldn't they be in the bottom half, not the top half in yards per game allowed? I think that they would. That's why I don't think that this team is the worst in football. And don't get it twisted. I'm not saying the offense has been great. They've been mid. They've been aggressively average. But that's exactly where the Saints are at. They are aggressively average. They are not the worst. They are not terrible. They are not horrible. They are not the worst team in the league. The Saints offense has been aggressively mid. And we're going to prove that in full detail. And then we're going to take a look at the defense afterwards. Offensively, here's how things have shaken out. Again, I'm going to pose the question. Would the worst team in the league have the 13th ranked rushing offense? Would the worst team in the league have the 22nd ranked passing offense? Will the worst team in the league have any of these rankings? Hard to argue that they would, because if you're in this category, you are in the 20s. 32 teams. You're ranking in the 20s. The New Orleans Saints, again, not the worst team in the league. You also can't call the Saints the worst team in football if their quarterback is putting up good production. Do you want to have a conversation about Spencer Rattler? Let's have one. Because obviously, he is a player who got thrown into a really weird situation. He's a player who, whenever he took over for New Orleans last year, they were decimated by injuries. They were in the midst of about to fire their head coach. They had a horrible situation. Now they have a quarterback whisperer in Kellen Moore. Now the team is more healthy. Now the team is building around him. And you can see that he is playing quality ball. I'm not saying he's been the best quarterback in the league. That could not be further from the truth. But it also could not be further from the truth saying that he has been absolutely terrible. Now let's look at the rankings in terms of the passing leaders based on the passing yards for each of these quarterbacks. Of course, at the upper echelons, you're going to have some of those elite players, but a guy who's been deemed as quote-unquote elite or amazing or phenomenal in Jaden Daniels barely has more passing yards. Tua Tagovailoa, 8 more passing yards. Caleb Williams, not significantly worse, but he's playing worse. Michael Penix, I included him just for the sake of, look, the Falcons are going to say that their quarterback is so much better and leaps and bounds better. Couldn't be further from the truth. They are right neck and neck, in my opinion, when it comes to having this conversation. Again, the New Orleans Saints do not have the worst offense. They do not have the worst quarterback. They do not have the worst running back. They do not have the worst receiving core. How are you going to call them the worst offense in the league? How are you going to call them the worst team in the league? Their play caller is a quarterback whisperer. He's getting the best out of Spencer Rattler. He's getting decent football out of a fifth-round pick. Again, I'm not saying he's elite. I'm not saying that Spencer Rattler is the guy for the foreseeable future. I'm saying that the New Orleans Saints are clearly proving people wrong. And I'm going to take a look at the defensive side of the football and an even deeper dive look on Spencer Rattler, because it's a conversation that's extremely interesting and a lot of really, really neat numbers of players who he's playing better than. You're going to see some quarterbacks that are being deemed top 10 QBs in the league that he is actually putting up better production than. Really quickly, though, got to take a quick second to thank today's presenting sponsor, and that is PrizePicks. This episode of Saints Now brought to you by the #1 daily fantasy sports app in the whole wide world, none other than PrizePicks. You and I, ladies and gentlemen, we make decisions every single day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season where it's good to be right. PrizePicks is the best place to turn your ball knowledge into cold, hard cash. They put their users first. So all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. They offer Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this season. Now, in terms of how does the game work, you just pick more or less based on a couple of players, projected stats, and if you get them right, you cash in. So for this week, Saints versus Seahawks, I'm going to take Chris Olave to find the end zone. We're projecting it into existence. And JSN, I think he's had a really, really good season to start off so far. Plus, he's on my fantasy team, so I want him to help me win yet another week. And you guys can fade these picks. You can tail these picks. Don't care what you do. Just make sure you do it over on PrizePicks. Go lay down some money on Alvin Kamara's rushing yards. How many field goals is Blake Groupie going to make or miss? How many times will Olave get targeted? You can put down money on all sorts of really, really fun projections. It's the best way to win cash this football season. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your takes into cold, hard cash. Download the PrizePicks app and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Saints Now by Chat Sports is here to make that deal sweeter. If you use the code CLNS, you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Go win some money. Go test your ball knowledge. Shout out to PrizePicks. It's good to be right. All of that information is available in the comments and description of this video. Now, we're going to have a conversation about the better quarterback because, for what it's worth, this is a little bit of a personal one for me. A bunch of my friends are Bears fans. One of my best friends, shout out to my boy Wick, diehard Bears fan. You're going to hate this part, my friend. Spencer Rattler, factually, statistically, he is playing better football than first overall selection Caleb Williams. And he's not the only player that he's playing better than. You can take a look at all of the players who have played at least 2 games who have passed for less yards than Spencer Rattler. Friendly reminder, Rattler's stats are at the bottom of your screen: 421 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Caleb Williams, 417 yards. C.J. Stroud, 395 yards. Kyler Murray, 383 yards. Baker Mayfield, somebody who's been deemed as one of the better quarterbacks this year, 382. Jalen Hurts, Super Bowl MVP, not even 300 yards. Do you think Philadelphia misses Kellen Moore? Because I sure as hell think so. Cam Ward, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Sean Payton, the quarterback whisperer, the guy who's supposed to be the next Drew Brees, doesn't even have as many passing yards as Spencer Rattler. Doesn't even have 400 passing yards. Do you see what I'm saying here? Spencer Rattler is not the reason the New Orleans Saints are losing football games. And you can sit here and say, oh, you're making excuses again. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so tell me why Spencer Rattler was to blame for the Saints defense not getting all those stops on 3rd and 10. Tell me why Spencer Rattler's to blame for Blake Groupie missing field goals. Tell me why Spencer Rattler's to blame when players have balls hitting them in the chest and it's going right through their hands. I'm waiting. There's not a reason. Spencer Rattler is not the worst quarterback in the league. The New Orleans Saints are not the worst offense in the league. The New Orleans Saints defense is not the worst in the league. And obviously, wins and losses are ultimately where we base our decisions on who is good, who is bad. It's important to address wins and losses, of course. Wins and losses are a team stat. They're not a quarterback stat. Wins and losses do tell the tale of what is going on with the team. But the New Orleans Saints, although they are an 0-2 squad, they are a scrappy team that does not keel over when they get hit in the mouth. They fight through adversity, and they have proven that they are a team that if you F around, you might find out. The defense, ladies and gentlemen, I understand they have not been amazing. I understand there are problems. I am not here to sit here and make excuses. I'm not here to tell you that the Saints defense is not a problem, because they have been an issue. But not that much, to be totally honest. Also, for what it's worth, I forgot to address this, by the way. Caleb Williams has an 89.1 passer rating. Spencer Rattler has a 90.7. Just do whatever you want with that information. Forgot to address that. But defensively, look at this. 17th, mid. 14th, top half of the league. 14th, top half of the league. 13th, top half of the league. 17th, right in the middle. So the defense, not the bottom in the league in any of these categories. Oh, and by the way, worst team in the league would not have the number one producer in sacks on their team, would they, Lopez? Would the worst team in the league be that terrible? And this is why it's an interesting conversation, because although I do think the Browns are in this conversation, you still have Myles Garrett, who's going to put up really, really nice numbers for you. I'm not excusing that, but Myles Garrett, Harold Landry, Carl Granderson, Brian Burns, Jonah Laulu. I earlier made the joke, Jonah Labubu. Sack leaders in 2025. All of these teams are bad. Carl Granderson leads the NFL in sacks. He's tied for first. Based off of the numbers, the New Orleans Saints have the number one pass rusher in the NFL. How am I wrong? He has the most amount of sacks. He's tied for the number one amount of sacks. He is, statistically, Carl Granderson, the number one pass rusher next to Myles Garrett and next to Harold Landry. Again, obviously all those teams that have quality edge rushers and quality sack production right now in terms of the top 5 sack leaders in the NFL, those are all bad teams. But you see where I'm going with this? Like, I think that the Saints are moving in the right direction compared to the Browns, who are in the midst of yet another purgatory. The Giants, I would rather be Saints bad than Giants bad right now. The Raiders can't figure it out. The Saints, in my opinion, and the Patriots are those only 2 teams in that conversation that are trending upwards and in the right direction. You could make an argument about the Raiders, but their offense has been pretty dull, if you ask me. Now, again, this is not a conversation to say that the New Orleans Saints are an elite squad, because that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is they are aggressively average. Offensively, aggressively average. Defensively, the definition of aggressively average. There are upgrades and there are adjustments that are needed on defense. There are upgrades and adjustments that are needed on offense. But things could be much, much, much worse, ladies and gentlemen. And we don't have to look too far in the time machine. We don't have to look too far for another example of how bad could it be. Again, I said this about the Giants. I'd rather be Saints bad than Bears bad. Dennis Allen, former head coach, former defensive coordinator, guy that the Saints fired last year. His defense in Chicago has given up 70 points in the last 5 quarters of football. Let that settle in. 70 points in 5 quarters of football. Lopez, remind me last year, the Saints had the first 2 weeks, 40-plus points in both of those matchups. So 80 points in 2 weeks. Okay, that was in 8 quarters. Dennis Allen, his team scored 80 points in 8 quarters last year. On his new team, the defense, where he's supposed to be a defensive guru, 70 points in 5 quarters. Despicable. It could be so much worse than where we are at right now. And let me beg this question. I have one question for you, ladies and gentlemen. My final thoughts. If the New Orleans Saints, they don't have the worst offense, don't have the worst defense, don't have the worst quarterback, have the guy statistically who is tied for first in sack production, if you add all of that together, not the worst play calling, not the worst coaching staff, not the worst, and you're playing in a horrible division, you add all of these things together, how are they the worst team? Honest question. How are the New Orleans Saints the worst team if they do not have the worst offense, if they don't have the worst defense, if they don't have the worst quarterback? if they don't have the worst head coach? How are the Saints the worst team in football if they don't rank at the bottom of the league in any statistical category? Make it make sense. Put down the narrative, have an original thought, and maybe, just maybe, you can see that the New Orleans Saints are trending in the right direction. Now, in terms of players or teams that I think you could mention are worse. I'm not saying all of these teams are 100% definitely worse. I'm just saying there's an argument to be made for everyone you see on your screen. The Dolphins, they're terrible. The Panthers, awful. The Browns, dog shit. The Titans, shout out to Cam Ward, but they're bad. Chicago Bears, horrible. Giants, horrible. Jets, horrible. Jags, Patriots, Raiders, there's a little something there. There's reason to be optimistic over there. Giants, sure, they put up a bunch of points. Really, really heartbreaking loss, but they weren't able to finish. They weren't able to close out. So there's an argument to be made that all of these teams you see on your screen right now are worse than the New Orleans Saints. I'm not saying they 100% are. There's an argument to be made, though. And I will say for the Saints, moving forward, it's not about winning the division. It's not about winning the Super Bowl. It's not trying to make the playoffs. It's about building a strong foundation. The New Orleans Saints, proven by the stats, proven by the last 16 and a half minutes of what we've been discussing, are building that foundation. You can see that Kellen Moore is bringing good football out of Spencer Rattler. Could be better. We could definitely have better quarterback play, but he's bringing out good football in a fifth-round quarterback, a player who last year would just be a deer in headlights right now. The Saints, in my opinion, they are headed in the right direction. I think long-term, if you look at the Saints, they are one of the few squads who are doing things right when it comes to trying to fix things and trying to get back on track. I think that Kellen Moore was an excellent hire. I still believe in him heavily. And I think that as this continues to evolve and as this team continues to develop and as this team continues to take shape and form for Kellen Moore's vision, we're headed in the right direction. And we're going to find success. Just give it some time. Be patient. The New Orleans Saints are not the worst team in football. Silence the haters for me. There's been way too much noise, way too much hate, even from the guys here at the Chat Sports Studios. Type who dat if you believe the New Orleans Saints are not the bottom of the league. Type who dat if you believe black and gold. And type who dat if you want to prove the doubters wrong. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this video. Fun content. Had to spend the last, 18 almost minutes just breaking down why I'm a firm believer that the New Orleans Saints are headed in the right direction and why they are not an absolute clown show and not a circus. Although it may be frustrating, it could be a lot worse, and the New Orleans Saints factually, statistically, and in my opinion, are not the worst in football. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Y'all stay golden, and we'll see you next time.